Hey guys, tonight we begin with ancient Greek parties. And no, this is not going to be a calm evening of wise men sipping wine and politely nodding at each other. So before you get comfortable, take a moment, like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are not going to a party. That would imply joy, spontaneity, and the possibility of leaving early without social consequences. You are going to a symposium, which is a very serious word ancient Greeks used to disguise the fact that a group of grown men planned to drink wine until their opinions became louder than their reasoning. The invitation was carefully worded. It didn't mention alcohol. It mentioned discussion, ideas, friendship, possibly virtue. This is how you know. Wine will be involved. Food, however, will not. You already ate somewhere else, because dinner is merely the warm-up. The symposium exists, so everyone can focus on the real goal, seeing how many philosophical beliefs survive prolonged exposure to wine. You arrive at the house pretending you're here for intellectual stimulation. This is polite lying. No one calls you out on it, because they are lying too. You are expected to participate. Quietly, listening is suspicious. Silence suggests either arrogance or sobriety, and neither is welcome. A servant removes your shoes, which feels ceremonial until you realize it's mainly to prevent you from slipping later. The room is arranged with couches lining the walls. Chairs would imply posture. Posture implies self-control. Self-control ruins everything. You recline, attempting to look natural, which is difficult because the human body was not designed to lie sideways while debating morality. You glance around and notice everyone else pretending this is comfortable. You join them in this shared delusion. Your spine will file a formal complaint tomorrow. The lighting is low, not for romance, but so no one can clearly see each other's expressions once judgment begins to decline. The room hums with quiet anticipation, the sound of men about to become very confident about topics they only half understand. You tell yourself this will be civilized, thoughtful conversation, measured drinking, reasonable conclusions. You make these promises the way people promise they'll just have one cup. Then the wine arrives. It is mixed with water because the Greeks were many things, but suicidal was not one of them. You nod approvingly at the ratio, even though you will absolutely ignore it later. The symposium has officially begun. At this point, reason is still present. It won't stay long, because once everyone starts drinking, the symposium reveals its true purpose. Not to discover truth, but to test how confidently wrong a person can be while reclining. And you are about to participate enthusiastically. The moment you enter the room, you are expected to lie down. Not eventually, not after a polite pause, immediately. Standing too long suggests uncertainty, and uncertainty is not fashionable at a symposium. Chairs are nowhere to be found. This is intentional. Chairs imply structure. Structure implies limits. Limits are the enemy of whatever tonight is about to become. You choose a couch and recline, trying to make it look natural. It is not natural. The human body was not designed to eat, drink, gesture, and argue about morality while leaning on one elbow like a fainting aristocrat. But everyone else is doing it, so you commit fully. Half reclining is worse than wrong. It's embarrassing. Your left arm goes numb almost immediately. You ignore it. Complaining would suggest weakness, and weakness invites philosophical attacks. You adjust your position slightly, which somehow makes it worse. At this point, you accept that circulation is optional, and dignity is already gone. Reclining is not about comfort. It is about equality. When everyone is lying down, no one is towering over anyone else. Power is flattened. Authority becomes conversational. Also, it becomes much easier to spill wine without standing up to fix it. The couches are arranged along the walls, creating a ring of bodies facing inward. This ensures eye contact, lots of it. You can't hide in the back. Every opinion you express will be witnessed, remembered, and possibly quoted back to you later. Incorrectly, but with confidence. Servants move quietly through the room, stepping over sandals and avoiding elbows. You admire their skill. They have done this many times. They already know which guests will become unbearable first. As you settle in, you notice the subtle competition. Who looks the most relaxed? Who recines like this is their natural state? Who looks like they were born arguing sideways? You attempt to match their ease. You fail, but no one comments. They are too busy preparing their own performances. Lying down also slows drinking in theory. In practice, it just makes refills easier because cups are already horizontal. You hold yours carefully, telling yourself you will sip slowly. This decision lasts approximately one conversation. At this stage, everyone is still relatively coherent. Voices are calm, laughter is measured, opinions are phrased politely. This is the illusion phase, the part of the evening everyone remembers fondly. Even though it lasts about 10 minutes, you are now reclined, numb, and committed. The symposium has really begun. The wine arrives sooner than you would like, and faster than you are prepared for. It is carried in with ceremony, poured from a large communal bowl, and treated with a seriousness usually reserved for religious objects. This should be your first warning. You are told politely, confidently that the wine has been mixed with water. This is meant to reassure you. It should not. Ancient Greek wine is not modern wine. It is thicker, darker, and strong enough that drinking it straight would turn the symposium into a public safety incident. Dilution is not moderation. It is survival. You take your first sip carefully. It tastes sharp, earthy, and slightly offended that you're being cautious. You nod appreciatively, as if you understand wine. Everyone else does the same. This is a room full of men pretending they know exactly what they're doing. The ratio, you quickly realize, is ambitious, not reckless yet, but confident. The host wants conversation to flow. He wants opinions, he wants arguments, he wants everyone just drunk, enough to be honest, and just sober enough to articulate it badly. You tell yourself you will pace your drinking. This is a common thought at symposia and almost always the last sensible one of the evening. You sip slowly, listening to the early conversations, light topics, safe ideas, gentle teasing. Everyone is still performing civilization. Then someone refills your cup. You did not ask for this. It simply happens. The cup is never empty long enough to be lonely. You consider declining the refill, but that would suggest either arrogance or weakness. So, you accept it graciously while mentally recalculating how much control you actually have left. As the wine settles in, you feel warmer, looser, more articulate. You begin to believe your thoughts are clearer than usual. This is incorrect, but the confidence is convincing. You speak a little or you gesture a little wider. Your voice gains weight as if every sentence now deserves attention. Around the room, the same transformation is happening. Laughter becomes louder, interruptions become more frequent, agreements become enthusiastic, disagreements become personal. The wine is doing exactly what it was meant to do. You glance at the communal bowl and realize it is already lower than it should be. Someone makes a joke about it. Someone else refills your cup again. You stop counting. At this point, the symposium crosses an invisible threshold. No one announces it. No one acknowledges it, but everyone feels it. The night is no longer being guided by reason. The wine has taken over politely, efficiently, and with full consent, and you are absolutely sure this is going very well. At some point, someone decides the evening needs structure. This is adorable. In an effort to preserve balance, moderation, and the illusion of control, a symposia is appointed. The person responsible for regulating the wine, setting the pace, and preventing the symposium from turning into a philosophical crime scene. This person is chosen either because they are respected, intimidating, or sitting closest to the bowl. None of these qualities will matter. The symposia announces the rules. He speaks confidently as if authority still functions in this room. He explains the wine-to-water ratio, the timing of refills, and the importance of not drinking too much too fast. Everyone nods. These nods mean nothing. They are ceremonial nods, like the kind you give, before ignoring instructions entirely. For about 5 minutes, the system works. Cups are filled carefully. Refills are spaced out. People pretend restraint is a shared value. You even believe this might succeed. Then someone laughs too hard. Then someone else refills their cup without asking. Then the symposia refills his own cup. Where? This is not a great look for leadership. You watch his authority quietly dissolve as guests begin topping off their wine whenever a servant walks by. No one challenges him directly. That would be rude. Instead, everyone simply behaves, as if the rules are suggestions, the way people treat speed limits on empty roads. The symposia attempts to reassert control. He clears his throat. He makes a comment about moderation. Someone responds with a joke. The room laughs. The moment is gone. From now on, the symposium will run on momentum. You notice that cups are no longer being emptied before refilling. This is an important development. Wine is now stacking. Conversations overlap. The room grows louder. The symposia gives up and recedes deeper into his couch, accepting his fate. This is not failure. This is tradition. The position of symposia exists not to maintain order, but to give the evening a brief head start before chaos. It provides structure the way a thin rope provides structure to a landslide. You stop, paying attention to who is in charge. No one is. The wine decides now, and strangely, this feels correct. The symposium is no longer pretending to be governed. It has reached its natural state. A room full of confident voices, loosened minds, and cups that are never empty long enough to cool. Responsibility had its moment. It passed quietly without protest. Once responsibility has officially left the room, entertainment arrives. This is meant to elevate the evening. It does not. It does, however, make it louder. Someone produces a liar. This person believes they are talented. No one challenges this belief because the wine has reached the point where disagreement feels like unnecessary effort. The first notes are plucked, and you nod appreciatively even though you cannot tell whether the instrument is being tuned or slowly threatened. Music at a symposium is not background. Denoise. It demands attention. You're expected to listen, react, and look emotionally moved. So you do. You tilt your head slightly. You close your eyes for a moment. You make a thoughtful face that says, yes, this is culture. Even though what you're actually thinking is, this sounds better from further away. Then comes singing. Someone begins reciting poetry. Another joins in. The rhythm is questionable. The volume is ambitious. The confidence is unmatched. You clap politely at the end, because that is what civilized people do when they are unsure whether something has gone wrong. The musician, encouraged by the applause, continues. At this point, you realize the purpose of the music is not enjoyment. It is participation. It fills the room, prevents silence, and gives everyone something to agree on without thinking too hard. You tell yourself it's better than more debating. This may not be true, but it feels comforting. As the wine works its way deeper into the room, the music grows bolder. Someone starts tapping along, someone else hums incorrectly. A third person insists on correcting the melody and makes it worse. The lyre player accepts these contributions with grace, which is impressive considering the circumstances. You begin to sway slightly, not because you are enjoying the music, but because lying down and drinking wine has affected your sense of balance. You assure yourself this looks natural. Servants move through the chaos with practiced indifference. They have seen this before. They know how this ends. They refill cups while stepping around, enthusiastic gestures and dangerously expressive elbows. By now, the music is no longer entertainment. It is atmosphere. It blends into the laughter, the conversation, the wine splashing, just a little too close to the floor. You continue to nod, clap, and pretend. This is exactly how you hoped the evening would go. Anne, somewhere in the back of your mind you realize something important. This is only the beginning. The once music has softened everyone's judgment, and wine has convinced you that your reflexes are excellent. Someone suggests games. This is the turning point. This is where the evening stops pretending to be about culture and becomes about proving things that do not need proving. The games are simple. That's what makes them dangerous. One involves flicking wine from your cup at a target, usually a small dish or bowl placed across the room. The rules are explained quickly and poorly. Accuracy is praised, spillage is ignored. You participate because opting out would imply cowardice or worse, sobriety. You flick, you miss. Wine splashes onto the floor. No one cares. In fact, someone cheers. You are encouraged by this response and flick again with more confidence and less control. The target is now theoretical. Another game involves riddles. Someone poses a clever question, expecting clever answers. This works for approximately 1 round. After that, the riddles become increasingly abstract, then aggressively confusing and finally indistinguishable from statements. You offer an answer anyway. Everyone nods like it makes sense. The point is not winning. The point is participation. The point is noise. As the games continue, the room becomes more animated. Reclining turns into half-sitting. Half-sitting turns into leaning dangerously forward. Gestures widen, cups tilt, the couch leg becomes suspiciously wet. You notice that people are laughing before the jokes land. Sometimes there is no joke at all. Laughter arrives anyway, as if summoned. At some point, a competitive spirit emerges. Someone insists on keeping score. This is abandoned almost immediately when no one agrees on the rules or the numbers. Another person claims victory anyway. No one disputes it. Wine is now every W. Here, on hands, on clothing, on the floor, on ideas. Servants stop trying to clean and switch to damage control. They have accepted that the symposium has entered its active phase. You feel unusually confident in your abilities. You are convinced your aim has improved. It has not. You flick wine with dramatic flair and knock something over. It makes a sound that suggests it was important. There is a brief pause, then laughter, encouraging laughter. This is how the games work. They remove restraint, amplify bravado, and gently push everyone toward the edge of decorum, and then over it. You are having fun. You are also absolutely making a fool of yourself. Both things are true. Just when you think the evening has reached its peak of harmless chaos, philosophy arrives. Not politely, not on schedule. It simply barges in, sets itself down, between 2 spilled cups, and demands to be taken seriously. Someone clears their throat and announces a topic. It doesn't matter which one. Virtue, justice, love, the good life, the nature of truth. You recognize the words immediately and feel a surge of confidence because you have heard these words before. This convinces you that you are qualified to speak. You begin carefully forming a thoughtful sentence. It starts well, it ends somewhere else entirely. No one notices. They are too busy preparing their own contributions which they believe will be more profound. Within moments, the room is full of opinions, not arguments, opinions, loud ones. Everyone speaks as if they are discovering ancient wisdom in real time, even though half of it was heard secondhand last week, and the other half was invented during the last refill. You interrupt someone, they interrupt you back. This is not considered rude. It is considered engagement. Gestures become theatrical. You point, you wave, you recline more aggressively. At one point, you knock your cup slightly and hold it steady just in time. This feels like a victory worth mentioning. You do mention it. No one listens. Someone insists that virtue can be taught. Someone else insists it cannot. A third person insists that both positions are wrong, but does not explain why. You nod enthusiastically because this feels correct. The wine has reached the stage where every idea feels urgent. Silence becomes uncomfortable. You speak not because you have something to say, but because not speaking feels like losing. Across the room, someone laughs loudly at their own point. Another person claps, in agreement with a statement they did not fully hear. This is how consensus forms. The debate grows warmer, louder, and increasingly personal. You feel passionate about what exactly is unclear, but the feeling is undeniable. And then it happens. You say something you immediately believe is brilliant. It sounds right. It feels important. It lands with confidence. For a brief moment, the room quiets. Someone nods. Someone else repeats part of what you said, but slightly wrong. You bask in this moment. Tomorrow, you will not remember what you said. Tonight, you are absolutely certain it changed everything. Philosophy has taken control of the symposium, and it is drunk. At some point, without any formal announcement, you begin speaking louder. You don't decide to do this. It simply happens the way tides happen, or the way bad ideas gain confidence after wine. In your mind, you are not shouting, you are projecting. There is a difference, and you are convinced everyone appreciates it. Your voice now carries across the room. This feels important. You lean forward on the couch, gesturing broadly as if volume alone can shepherd your thoughts into coherence. It cannot, but the effort is impressive. You notice that when you speak loudly, people look at you. This reinforces the behavior. Eye contact becomes validation. You take pauses for effect. The pauses are too long. Someone fills them. You raise your voice slightly to regain control. This works, but only briefly. Your arguments have simplified. Nuance has quietly left the room and taken logic with it. You no longer explain why you believe something. You simply state it firmly, as if firmness is evidence. This is incredibly satisfying. Around you, everyone else has reached the same stage. Conversations overlap. No one is listening fully. People respond to fragments of sentences, nodding vigorously at points that were never made. Agreement and disagreement blur into a single loud activity. You laugh louder too. You are not entirely sure what you're laughing at, but the timing feels right. Someone else laughs with you. This creates a moment of shared joy that you assume will be remembered fondly. It will not. Your gestures become ambitious. You knock something over again. This time you notice. You apologize with enthusiasm and continue speaking without waiting for a response. This is considered acceptable. You are convinced that your thoughts are clearer than they have ever been. You feel articulate, expressive, unstoppable. In reality, you are repeating yourself with increasing confidence and decreasing precision. This does not concern you. At one point, you hear yourself talking and think, yes, this is exactly how a serious thinker sounds. This thought brings you great comfort. The room is now fully alive, loud, warm, and vibrating with overlapping opinions. Wine cups are constantly refilled. Servants have stopped intervening. You are no longer participating in the symposium. You are the symposium. And somewhere deep inside, a quieter version of you is taking notes for tomorrow, though it will be ignored completely. That's when you notice him. There is always one man at the symposium who should not exist. While everyone else has gradually loosened, softened, and emotionally leaned into the wine, this man remains sharp, upright, annoyingly present. He drinks a lot, and yet somehow nothing happens to him. You do not like this man. He receives calmly, listening more than speaking, eyes clear, posture steady. He remembers names, he follows arguments, he reacts at appropriate moments. This is deeply unsettling. You glance at his cup, hoping to see that it's been secretly filled with water. It has not. Every time you make a bold claim, this man tilts his head slightly, not aggressively, not dismissively, thoughtfully. This is worse. You can't tell if he agrees, disagrees, or is simply cataloguing your mistakes for later use. Someone asks him a question. He answers concisely, clearly, with terrifying coherence. The room quiets for a moment, as if recognizing a predator. You feel the sudden urge to interrupt, not because you disagree, but because silence feels dangerous. You speak louder than intended. He looks at you again. This man will remember tonight, while others are repeating themselves, exaggerating stories, and slowly unraveling. He continues engaging with fresh points. You begin to suspect he is not drinking wine the way everyone else is drinking. Wine. He is drinking it like a tool. This feels unfair. You reassure yourself that no one will remember what you said earlier, that everything spoken here will dissolve by morning into vague impressions and wine-soaked regret. This belief collapses every time he nods, smiles, faintly, or responds directly to something you said 10 minutes ago accurately. You avoid his gaze. You reposition yourself on the couch, pretending your arm has gone numb again. You laugh loudly at a nearby joke, hoping distraction will save you. It does not. At some point, someone praises this man for his endurance. He shrugs modestly. You resent him, foe. This too. The symposium continues around him like a storm, but he remains untouched, a calm center of memory and clarity. You realize with a sinking feeling that tomorrow, when you struggle to recall the evening, this man will recall it for you. In detail, you decide to drink more. This seems like the correct response because if one person is going to remember everything you said tonight, the least you can do is make sure you don't. At some point in the evening, usually between a particularly confident argument and a poorly aimed gesture, you notice something important by its absence. Respectable women are not here. This is not an oversight. This is policy. The symposium is a male space, designed very carefully to be exactly that. Wives, daughters, and women of good standing remain elsewhere, protected from this spectacle, or perhaps protected from you. The Greeks call this order. You call it convenient because no one you actually have to face tomorrow is present to hear what you are saying tonight. The women who are present fall into very specific categories: musicians, entertainers, courtesans. They are educated, articulate, and far more sober than anyone on the couches. This is not an accident. Someone has to remember how the night actually went. They move through the room with practiced calm, playing instruments, singing, refilling cups, observing. They laugh at the right moments. They listen closely. They make mental notes you will never have access to. You briefly convince yourself that this makes the symposium more philosophical, fewer distractions, you think, just men and ideas. This is incorrect. The real effect is that the room becomes louder, bolder, and significantly more confident in opinions that have not been tested by reality. Someone makes a dramatic statement about love. You nod along enthusiastically, forgetting that no one present is allowed to challenge this perspective from experience. Another man declares something about women's nature. You agree reflexively because agreement is easier than thought. At this point, the entertainers remain neutral. They've heard all of this before, last week and the week before. That, possibly from the same men. You attempt to impress one of them with an observation you are certain is clever. She smiles politely. This should concern you. It does not. The absence of respectable women creates a strange freedom. No restraint, no witnesses that matter. Opinions grow unchecked. Confidence inflates. The symposium becomes a sealed environment where ideas bounce around without resistance, growing louder and less accurate with every pass. You feel emboldened, safer, less accountable. This, you later realize, is exactly the problem. Because a room where only one kind of voice is allowed does not become wiser. It becomes louder. And tonight, volume is winning. By now, the room has changed. You can feel it. The air is thicker, heavier, layered with smoke, wine, sweat, and confidence. Lamps flicker. Shadows stretch along the walls. What once felt intimate now feels crowded, even though no one new has entered. This is what happens when too many opinions occupy too little space. You are warm, too warm. The kind of warm that makes you forget when you last felt comfortable. You shift on the couch trying to cool down without standing up, because standing up would involve consequences. You loosen your clothing slightly and immediately feel like this was the right decision. It was not. Voices overlap constantly now. Conversations no longer take turns. They collide. Someone laughs loudly from across the room, not because something was funny, but because laughter has become a reflex. You join in without knowing why. This feels natural. Emotions begin, leaking into the discussions. What start? Edda's abstract ideas now sound suspiciously personal. A debate about justice turns into a complaint about unfair treatment. A discussion about virtue becomes an accusation. Someone mentions honor. Someone else takes it personally. You are not sure why, but you nod. You find yourself reacting faster than you think. Words leave your mouth before they are fully formed. You interrupt someone mid-sentence, then immediately forget what you were going to say. You fill the silence with volume. This seems effective. The heat makes everything feel urgent. Every statement sounds like it matters deeply. You are convinced that if you don't speak now, your thought will disappear forever. This is incorrect, but you speak anyway. Several people speak at once. No one wins. Someone slams a cup down for emphasis. Wine spills. No one cleans it up. That would slow things down. Another person leans forward dramatically, knocking knees with a neighbor. Apologies are exchanged loudly and immediately. Forgotten. You notice faces are redder now. Eyes are brighter. Movements are sharper. The symposium has reached emotional operating temperature. This is where things are said that will echo quietly later, usually at inconvenient times. You feel alive, engaged, fully present. You also feel a faint sense of danger, like standing too close to a fire you built yourself. The room is no longer just hosting the symposium. The room is the symposium, pulsing, loud, emotional, and one careless sentence away from becoming unforgettable. At some point, the argument you were passionately defending simply disappears. It doesn't end. It doesn't resolve. It just quietly slips out of your grasp like a thought you were absolutely sure you had 5 seconds ago. This should alarm you. It does not. What remains is confidence, pure, undiluted confidence. You no longer remember what started the debate, but you are certain you were correct. You feel this deeply in your bones, in your gestures, in the way you nod while someone else speaks, as if confirming points that may or may not align with what you were previously saying. Someone challenges you. You respond immediately without hesitation. The response is firm, decisive, and completely unrelated to the challenge. No one points this out. That would slow the momentum. Momentum is sacred. Now, you begin repeating yourself. This feels intentional, like emphasis. You believe repetition adds strength. It does not, but the conviction behind it is impressive. Each time you restate your point, you do so louder, as if volume might summon clarity back into existence. Around the room, the same phenomenon is unfolding. Everyone has lost the thread, but no one has lost certainty. Statements float freely, detached from evidence, context, or even grammar. They collide occasionally and are immediately applauded. You hear yourself say something and think, yes, exactly. That's what I meant. Even though you have no idea what you meant, someone agrees with you enthusiastically. This feels validating. You do not question why they agree or what they think you said. Agreement is enough. You are no longer debating ideas. You are defending a feeling. The feeling that you are right and that this matters. Silence feels threatening. You feel it quickly. Others do the same. The room hums with overlapping declarations, none of which require follow-up. You lean back, satisfied. Your work here is done. You have contributed meaningfully to the evening's intellectual atmosphere. You know this because you feel very sure about it. Somewhere nearby, someone is still sober enough to notice the disconnect. You do not look at them. The symposium has reached a crucial stage, the point where clarity is gone, memory is unreliable, but confidence has achieved total independence. This is dangerous territory, but it feels incredible. Eventually, the symposium does not end. It simply loses momentum and collapses inward like a tired argument that can no longer support itself. No one announces that it's time to leave. People just begin failing to continue. You attempt to sit up fully. This was a mistake. Your body responds with a brief but firm reminder that reclining sideways for hours while drinking was not part of its design specifications. You pause, pretending this hesitation was intentional. No one questions it. Several people are doing the same thing. Around the room, conversations trail off mid-sentence. Someone begins a thought, forgets it halfway through, and replaces it with laughter. Another person stands up too fast, immediately regrets it, and pretends they were just stretching philosophically. A servant appears with a lamp. This is the universal signal. Night has entered its final phase, assisted departure. The servant does not ask if you need help. They already know. You rise carefully, one limb at a time, negotiating with gravity as if it might be open to compromise. The floor feels farther away than expected. The couch, which betrayed you earlier, now tries to pull you back in. You refuse. Shoes are returned to you. You stare at them briefly, as if unsure what their purpose is. Eventually, you put them on, not correctly, but adequately. Outside, the night air hits you with brutal honesty. It is colder, sharper, and far less impressed by your confidence. You inhale deeply and immediately regret it. The wine does not appreciate fresh air. Someone places a steadying hand on your arm. You accept this without comment. Independence is no longer a priority. As you walk, the street seems longer than it was on the way in. The lamplight sways, shadows stretch. You feel both deeply thoughtful and profoundly empty. This feels philosophical, so you decide not to question it. You attempt to recall the evening. You remember fragments, laughter, strong opinions. The sober man's face, something you said that felt important. The details are gone, but the certainty remains that you were brilliant. Your escort listens, patiently, as you summarize your own thoughts to yourself out loud. They do not respond. This is kindness. When you finally reach your door, you pause. You feel like something meaningful has happened, something lasting, something worth remembering. You will not remember it. Tomorrow you will wake with a headache, a dry mouth, and the vague suspicion that you owe someone an apology, though you will not be sure who. Tonight, however, you are convinced the symposium was a success. You survived it, and that in ancient Greece counted as participation. Morning arrives with absolutely no regard for what you did the night before. There is no gentle transition, no respectful pause. You wake up as if summoned by an angry god who has reviewed your behavior and found it disappointing. Your head hurts in a way that feels philosophical. Your mouth is dry, your eyes resist opening, and your body refuses to cooperate without negotiation. You lie still for a moment, hoping this is temporary. It is not. As memory returns, it does so selectively and cruelly. You remember confidence, you remember volume, you remember being absolutely certain you were correct. You do not remember why. Fragments surface. A gesture, a laugh that went on too long, a sentence that began with conviction and ended somewhere unsafe. You replay moments, hoping clarity will arrive, and instead, discovering only new layers of regret, you sit up slowly. This feels like a mistake, but you continue anyway. The room tilts slightly as if offering commentary. You take this as criticism. Now comes the real danger, running into people. Every passerby feels like a potential witness. Did they hear you last night? Did they hear about you last night? You scan faces for recognition, judgment, or worse, amusement. Someone greets you warmly. This does not reassure you. Warmth suggests memory. You attempt to reconstruct the symposium logically. There was wine, there was debate, there was laughter. At some point you were winning an argument. You are sure of this. The lack of evidence does not trouble you. It simply annoys you. Then you remember him, the sober man, the one who listened, the one who nodded, the one who will remember everything you said accurately and without mercy. You feel a chill unrelated to the morning air. You consider avoiding him indefinitely. Throughout the day, ordinary tasks feel heavier. Conversations feel louder. Every sound feels personal. You promise yourself you will never drink that much again. This promise feels sincere and will last until the next invitation. By evening, the worst of the discomfort fades, leaving behind a familiar sense of resignation. Whatever you said, it's too late now. The symposium has passed into memory, yours fractured and forgiving, others precise and permanent. You tell yourself, this is part of the process. This is how ideas are tested. This is how men learn mostly. This is how men learn to pace their drinking. You survive the morning, you survive the day, and by nightfall you almost believe you'd do it all again. With a little distance and a lot of water, you begin to understand what last night really was. It was not chaos, it was not refinement either. It was something in between, a strange human machine that turned wine, voices, ego, and time into ideas that occasionally mattered. Ancient Greek parties did not produce philosophy because everyone behaved well. They produced philosophy because people didn't. Ideas were not born in silence or calm contemplatio. They emerged from argument, contradiction, exaggeration, and the sheer refusal to stop talking even when logic had clearly left the building. You did not attend the symposium to find truth. You attended to test it loudly, imperfectly, and in front of witnesses. You threw thoughts into the room the way others threw wine, carelessly, enthusiastically, and with very little concern for cleanup. Most of what was said last night will never matter. It will dissolve into jokes, retellings, and second-hand embarrassment. But a few fragments, a question, a challenge, a contradiction will linger. Someone will remember them. Someone will revisit them, sober. Someone will write them down later, minus the slurring and confidence. This is the part history prefers not to mention. The great ideas of ancient Greece did not emerge fully formed from serene minds. They were hammered out in rooms like this, smoky, loud, uncomfortable rooms where men reclined awkwardly, drank too much, interrupted each other, and mistook confidence for insight until insight occasionally appeared by accident. You were not attending a party, you were participating in a social engine. The symposium was a place where hierarchy softened, restraint loosened, and voices collided without a clear winner. It allowed people to say the wrong thing loudly enough for someone else to correct it later. That correction, not the original speech, is what survived. From nights like this came philosophy, politics, theatre, and art. Not because the environment was ideal, but because it was human, messy, emotional, flawed, repetitive, loud. So when you imagine ancient Greek parties, do not picture calm men in white robes nodding thoughtfully. Picture a room full of confidence, spilled wine, half-finished thoughts, and one man who remembers everything. Picture ideas being born not from order, but from friction. You were not there to behave. You were there to contribute, even badly. And somehow, against all odds, it worked. That is what ancient Greek parties were actually like. Before cooking became culture, it was survival. Long before kitchens had walls or names, they existed as rings of stone surrounding a fire that never truly slept. In the ancient world, flame was the first tool, the first technology, and the first line between life and death. Cooking did not begin with taste, it began with necessity. Early humans quickly learned that raw food was risky, meat spoiled fast, roots were hard to digest, and parasites were an invisible threat. Fire changed all of that. Heat softened tough fibers, killed disease, and released energy trapped inside plants and flesh. A roasted animal was not just safer to eat, it fed more people for longer. In this sense, cooking was humanity's earliest form of efficiency. These first meals were simple but deliberate. Meat was stewed on sharpened sticks or laid directly on hot stones. Tubers were buried in ash to cook slowly underground. Nothing was wasted. Bones were cracked for marrow. Fat dripped into the fire and flavored everything around it. Smoke clung to hair, skin, and clothing, becoming the scent of daily life. There were no recipes, but there was knowledge. Elders knew which plants became edible after heating and which remained deadly no matter what you did to them. Fire made bitter roots tolerable and transformed poisonous seeds into staples. Cooking was learned by watching, copying, and remembering, not by writing. Over time, fire itself became organized. Hearths were built in fixed places. Ash was cleared, stones arranged, airflow managed. This was not accidental. A good hearth meant consistent heat, which meant predictable food. Predictable food meant stability. Stability meant settlements. In this way, cooking helped anchor humans to place long before agriculture fully took over. Flavor came later. At first there was only heat, smoke, and time. But even then, preferences formed. Some foods tasted better roasted than boiled. Some meats were sweeter when cooked slowly. These small observations were the ancestors of cuisine. The birth of cooking was not glamorous. It was smoky, messy, and dangerous. Burns were common. Fires spread. But every cooked meal quietly rewired the human body and brain, allowing more energy, larger communities, and longer lives. Before, cooking was art. Before it was tradition. Before it was pleasure. It was fire, patience, and hunger working together. As fire became controlled, cooking became contained. In ancient Mesopotamia, one of the world's earliest urban civilizations, this shift took a decisive form. Clay. The invention of pottery changed ancient kitchens forever. Food was no longer just roasted or scorched. It could now be simmered, mixed, and transformed slowly over time. Mesopotamian kitchens revolved around clay pots set directly into hearths. These vessels allowed for boiling and stewing, methods perfectly suited to a land shaped by rivers, grain, and livestock. Barley, wheat, onions, garlic, and lentils formed the backbone of daily meals. Meat was a luxury stretched thin by cooking it in broths that could feed many mouths at once. What makes Mesopotamian cooking extraordinary is that it was written down on clay tablets, pressed with cuneiform script. Scribes recorded some of the oldest known recipes in human history. These were not poetic descriptions, but practical instructions, quantities, steps, and ingredients. Cooking had officially entered the realm of knowledge worth preserving. The stews themselves were complex. They combined meat with leeks, herbs, fermented sauces, and fats. Some recipes included milk, beer, or blood as thickeners. Flavor came from balance rather than spick. Heat, salty, sour, and earthy notes layered together in ways that feel surprisingly modern. These meals were not cooked in isolation. Kitchens were social spaces, especially in larger households and temples. Women, servants, and enslaved workers prepared food in large quantities, feeding families, laborers, and gods alike. Offerings to deities were cooked with the same care as meals for humans, reinforcing the idea that food connected the divine and the everyday. Technology quietly supported all of this. Ovens made from clay and brick allowed for bread baking, while covered pots controlled evaporation and heat. Lids mattered. Timing mattered. Experience mattered. A good cook was valued not just for taste, but for consistency. Mesopotamian cooking shows us something crucial. Once food could be contained, it could be planned. Meals could be richer, more filling, and more reliable. Cooking was no longer just about surviving the day. It was about sustaining a society. From smoky fires to bubbling stews, the ancient kitchen had taken its first true shape. In ancient Egypt, cooking followed the river. The Nile did not just flood fields and feed crops, it set the rhythm of daily meals. When the waters rose and fell, they dictated what could be grown, stored, and eaten. Egyptian cooking was deeply practical, built around abundance when nature allowed, and restraint when it did not. Bread was the foundation of nearly every meal. Made primarily from emmer wheat and barley, it came in countless forms, flat, thick, sweetened, with dates or shaped into loaves for offerings. Grinding grain was hard. Labor, often done daily with stone queues. Sand inevitably worked its way into the flour, slowly wearing down teeth over a lifetime. Eating bread was nourishing, but it was not gentle. Beer was just as essential. Thick, cloudy, and low in alcohol, it was safer than water and consume. By adults and children alike. Beer was brewed from partially baked bread that was crumbled, soaked, and fermented. It provided calories, nutrients, and comfort, making it a liquid meal rather than a drink in the modern sense. Egyptian kitchens were simple but organized. Hearths were built from mud brick, and clay ovens baked bread by trapping heat inside domed structures. Cooking pots were round-bottomed and designed to sit in ash or be propped up by stones. There was no rush. Most dishes simmered, slowly, fueled by patience rather than flame. Vegetables filled the gaps that meat could not. Onions, leeks, garlic, lettuce and legumes were common, eaten fresh or cooked into stews. Fish from the Nile was widely consumed, dried or salted for preservation. Meat, beef, goat or poultry was reserved for festivals, temples and the wealthy. For most people it was an occasional treat rather than a daily expectation. Spices existed, but subtly. Coriander, cumin and herbs were used sparingly, enhancing rather than dominating food. Honey was the primary sweetener, added to breads and cakes for special occasions. Cooking aimed for nourishment, balance and familiarity, not excess. Food was also deeply symbolic. Offerings placed in tombs and temples mirrored real meals because eating was believed to continue after death. To cook well was not just to live well, it was to prepare for eternity. In Egypt, cooking was steady, repetitive, and reliable. It fed a civilization that valued order, continuity, and harmony with nature, one loaf and one cup of beer at a time. In ancient Greece, cooking stepped out of the dark interior and into the open air. Greek homes were built around courtyards, and so were their kitchens. Smoke escaped upward, light poured in from above, and meals were shaped as much by climate as by culture. Cooking here was simpler than in Mesopotamia or Egypt, but no L.S. intentional. At the center of Greek cooking was olive oil. It was fat, fuel, flavor, and preservation all at once. Olive oil replaced animal fat in most dishes used for frying, drizzling, and storing food. Bread dipped in oil was a meal. Vegetables cooked in oil were considered complete. Even fish was often grilled and finished with nothing more than oil. And herbs. Greek kitchens relied on portable clay braziers rather than fixed hearths. These small charcoal stoves could be moved depending on weather or occasion. Pots were placed directly on top, allowing for boiling and stewing, while skewers were used for roasting meat. This flexibility suited a society that valued outdoor living and communal meals. Grains remained essential, but bread in Greece was rough and dense, often mixed with barley. Wheat bread existed, but it was expensive and associated with status. For most people, porridge and flatbreads were everyday fare. Meals were filling, not indulgent. Vegetables were abundant and central. Cabbage, onions, lentils, chickpeas, and greens appeared constantly, cooked simply or eaten raw. Fish, especially for coastal communities, was more common than meat. Meat itself was tied closely to sacrifice. Animals were slaughtered during religious festivals, and cooking became a public, ritualized act. The gods received the smoke and fat, people ate the rest. Flavor in Greek cooking came from restraint. Herbs like oregano, thyme, and mint added aroma without overpowering the food. Garlic was common. Wine was used in cooking, and vinegar sharpened sauces. Spices from distant lands existed, but they were rare and costly, used sparingly if at all. Meals were social but structured. Men often ate together at symposia, reclining while servants brought food. Women cooked but rarely participated in these gatherings. Cooking, therefore, reflected social boundaries as much as taste. Greek cuisine was about balance between simplicity and nourishment, ritual and routine. The kitchen did not aim to impress. It aimed to sustain body, mind, and civic life, one olive oil dish at a time. In ancient Rome, cooking split into two very different worlds. There was the kitchen of the wealthy, filled with tools, servants, and imported ingredients. And then there was the street, where most Romans actually ate. The majority of the population lived in cramped apartment blocks with little or no space to cook. Open flames were dangerous, and kitchens were rare. As a result, Roman cities became some of the first true street food cultures in history. Thermopolia lined the streets, small food shops with counters embedded with clay jars holding hot dishes, stews, beans, lentils, bread, sausages, and fried foods were served quickly to workers, travelers, and the urban poor. You ate standing up, often with your hands, surrounded by noise, smoke, and shouting vendors. Convenience mattered more than comfort. For those who could cook at home, Roman kitchens were functional but smoky. Here's burned wood or charcoal and bronze, or iron cookware handled intense heat. Romans roasted, boiled, fried, and baked with confidence. Bread ovens existed both privately and publicly, producing loaves on an industrial scale for cities of hundreds of thousands. The defining feature of Roman cooking was sauce, especially garum. Made from fermented fish guts left to rot in the sun, garum was intensely salty, pungent, and unavoidable. It was added to nearly everything from meat to vegetables to wine. To Roman tastes, it was not disgusting, it was essential. Roman cuisine was also global. The empire pulled ingredients from across Europe, North Africa, and the Near East. Pepper came from India, dates from the desert, wine from Gaul and Spain. Wealthy households competed through extravagance, serving exotic animals, stuffed dormice, and elaborate multi-course meals designed to impress guests as much as feed them. Cooking in elite Roman homes was a performance. Professional cooks oversaw teams of slaves, timing dishes precisely to match conversation and spectacle. Recipes recorded by writers like Apicius focused on excess, complexity, and novelty, food as status. Yet beneath the luxury, the average Roman meal remained humble: bread, olives, beans, and watered wine. Meat was occasional. Hunger was common. Cooking reflected the inequalities of empire. In Rome, food was everywhere, in kitchens, on streets, in temples, and at banquets. Cooking had become not just survival or tradition, but identity, power, and display. In the world of the Aztec Empire, cooking began not with fire alone, but with stone. The foundation of daily food was maize, and maize could not be eaten raw. It had to be transformed through nixtamalization, soaking dried corn in an alkaline solution made from lime or ash. This process softened the kernels, released nutrients, and turned maize into something that could sustain an empire. This was not accidental chemistry. It was inherited knowledge refined over centuries. Without mixed amylization, corn causes malnutrition. With it, maize becomes complete. Every Aztec kitchen depended on this quiet but brilliant technique. Once prepared, the corn was ground by hand on a mat, a flat stone used with a heavy grinding tool. This was exhausting daily labor, usually done by women before dawn. The result was masa, a soft dough, that became tortillas, tamales, and countless other foods. Cooking began early because hunger waited for no one. Aztec hearths were simple, usually 3 stones supporting a clay comal, a flat griddle heated over fire. Tortillas were cooked quickly, flipped by hand, eaten fresh. They were not side dishes. They were plates, spoons, and plares all at once. Everything was wrapped in them. Beans, squash, chilies, tomatoes, and herbs filled out meals. Meat was rare. Turkey, dog, fish, or insects appeared occasionally, but most people ate plant-based diets by necessity, not ideology. Chilies provided heat, flavor, and preservation. Meals were spicy, smoky, and deeply aromatic. One of the most important drinks was chocolate, made from cacao beans, ground and mixed with water, chili, and spices. It was bitter, foamy, and cold. Chocolate was not a dessert. It was ritual, currency, and status. Only elites drank it freely. For everyone else, it was sacred and rare. Cooking in the Aztec world was inseparable from religion. Fire was alive. Food offerings fed gods. Meals followed calendars, rituals, and cosmic cycles. Even everyday cooking carried spiritual weight. Technology was subtle but effective. No metal cookware existed. Yet the system worked. Stone, clay, fire, and timing replaced iron and steel. Efficiency came from tradition, not tools. Aztec cooking was labor, intensive, repetitive, and essential. Every tortilla was the result of hours of preparation. Every meal reminded people that survival depended on knowledge, passed hand generation to generation. Here cooking was not luxury or display, it was discipline and devotion made edible. In ancient China, cooking evolved toward efficiency, balance, and control. Unlike cultures that relied heavily on roasting and open flames, Chinese kitchens favored methods that conserved fuel and maximized nutrition. This was not philosophical at first, it was practical. Wood was valuable, populations were dense, and cooking had to be fast, repeatable, and reliable. The hearth was compact, often built low to the ground with openings designed to channel heat precisely. From this came one of the most influential cooking tools in history, the wok. Thin metal wall, heated quickly, allowing food to cook in seconds rather than minutes. Stir-frying was not about speed for convenience, it was about survival in a resource-conscious world. Cutting mattered as much as cooking. Ingredients were sliced small and uniformly before touching heat. This reduced cooking time and made food easier to eat with chopsticks. Knives were used in preparation, not at the table. Cooking ended violence, eating required harmony, grains formed the base of the diet. In the north, militant wheat dominated. In the south, rice ruled daily life. Rice was steamed rather than baked, cooked in lidded pots that trapped heat and moisture. Steaming preserved texture and nutrients while using less fuel than boiling. Vegetables were constant: cabbage, greens, mushrooms, bamboo, shoots and roots. Soybeans were transformed into tofu, sauces, and pastes through fermentation. Another quiet technological triumph. Fermented foods added protein, flavor, and shelf life without the need for refrigeration. Meat existed, but in moderation. Pork and poultry were common when available, but always stretched with vegetables and grains. Bone broths extracted every possible nutrient. Nothing was wasted. Cooking reflected the belief that balance, not abundance, sustained health. Seasoning followed similar logic. Soy sauce, vinegar, ginger, garlic, and scallions layered flavor without overwhelming the dish. Spices were used deliberately, not excessively. The goal was harmony between salty, sour, bitter, sweet, and savory, an idea that would later be formalized, but was already practiced instinctively. Chinese cooking was also deeply tied to medicine. Food was categorized by its effect on the body: warming, cooling, drying, or moistening. What you cooked depended on the season, your health, and your age. The kitchen was an extension of preventative care. In ancient China, cooking was no tea spectacle. It was mastery through restraint. Heat was brief, cuts were precise, and meals were designed to sustain the body and maintain balance quietly, efficiently, and every single day. In ancient India, cooking was shaped by climate, belief, and an early mastery of flavor. Unlike many ancient cuisines that relied on subtle seasoning, Indian cooking embraced complexity early on. Heat, aroma, and spice were not afterthoughts. They were the foundation of the kitchen. Grains formed the base of daily meals. Wheat dominated the north, shaped into flatbreads cooked on hot gr. Rice ruled the south, boiled or steamed to accompany stews and vegetables. These staples were filling but intentionally plain, designed to carry stronger flavors layered on top. What truly distinguished Indian cooking was its use of spices. Turmeric, cumin, coriander, mustard seed, ginger, and black pepper were not used randomly. They were toasted, ground, and combined with purpose. Spices preserved food in hot climates, aided digestion, and added depth without relying on meat. Cooking here was chemistry guided by experience. Fire was controlled but constant. Clay hearths burned wood or dried dung, producing steady heat, ideal for slow cooking. Pots were thick-walled, designed to simmer lentils, vegetables, and grains into nourishing stews. These dishes could cook unattended, freeing time for work and ritual. Meat consumption varied widely. In many regions it was limited or avoided, altogether due to religious beliefs. The cow especially became sacred, shaping diets around dairy rather than slaughter. Milk was transformed into yogurt, butter, and clarified ghee, which became one of the most important cooking fats. Ghee added richness, stability, and flavor, and it burned cleanly in hot pans. Vegetarian cooking thrived not as restriction, but as innovation. Lentils and legumes provided vegetables were cooked in countless ways, fried, stewed, spiced, or fermented. Meals were balanced across textures and flavors, offering satisfaction without excess. Cooking was deeply ritualized. Meals followed rules of purity and timing. Certain foods were eaten at certain times of day. Hands were washed. Pots were cleaned meticulously. Eating was not casual. It was a controlled act tied to health and spirituality. Ancient Indian kitchens also understood the body. Food was classified according to its effects, heating or cooling, heavy or light. Cooking was preventative medicine meant to keep the body in equilibrium, rather than react to illness. In India, cooking was not just about feeding the body. It was about aligning the body with environment, belief, and balance. Every spice, every method served a purpose far beyond taste, sustaining life in both physical and spiritual form. Across the ancient world, kitchens looked radically different, yet they solved the same problem in remarkably clever ways. Whether built from stone, clay, or earth, the hearth was always the heart of daily life. Cooking was not a background task. It was constant labor repeated every day, shaping bodies, schedules, and societies. Ancient cooking reveals how deeply humans adapted to their environments. In river valleys, stews, stretched grains and meat. In dry climates, spices preserved food and aided digestion. In forests and plains, roasting and smoking protected against spoilage. Every technique emerged from necessity, not comfort. Technology played a quiet but decisive role. Clay pots allowed simmering. Flat stones became griddles. Fermentation turned perishable ingredients into stable staples. None of these required advanced tools, only observation, patience, and repetition. Innovation did not always look like progress. Often it looked like refinement. Cooking also exposed inequality. Lights ate variety and spectacle. Common people ate what sustained them. Street food fed cities. Temple kitchens fed gods. The same fire cooked both survival meals and luxury banquets, depending on who controlled the ingredients. Gender and labor were inseparable from the kitchen. In many cultures, women bore the daily burden of preparation, grinding grain, tending fires, carrying water, cleaning pots. Cooking demanded time, strength, and endurance. Meals were not effortless, they were earned. Food carried meaning beyond nutrition. Offerings honored deities. Certain foods marked festivals, status, or purity. What you ate and how reflected identity. Cooking defined belonging as much as language or dress. Despite the hardship, ancient cooking was efficient. Nothing was wasted. Bones became broth. Ash became fertilizer. Leftovers became tomorrow's meal. Modern abundance often hides this wisdom, but ancient kitchens ran on precision and restraint. Perhaps most striking is how familiar these meals still feel. Bread, stews, sauces, flatbreads, fermented foods. These are not relics, they are foundations still present today. Modern kitchens owe more to ancient ones than we often realize.